It's okay no yume mo atsume. One Piece! Oh my god, I love One Piece, bro. But you know what I love the most in One Piece? Pre-Timeskip. And before I talk, I know people are gonna be like, oh, he hates Pre-Timeskip. He's not a real One Piece fan. Bro, shut up. I love post-Timeskip One Piece, okay? Like, it has some of the craziest moments, fights, and storytelling in the whole show. Post-Timeskip is amazing in my opinion. But you know, there's just something about Pre-Timeskip One Piece that, you know, I just find so special. Honestly, it will probably always be my favorite part of One Piece. I don't think the story's ever gonna hit the same way again unless something crazy happens in the final saga. And you know, I just thought I wanted to talk about my feelings today. So when I think of Pre-Timeskip, the first thing that comes to my mind is the atmosphere. You know, the vibes, everything. The world felt huge, but it was also really personal. You know, every island, every arc, every challenge we encountered, somehow it revolved around the Straw Hats themselves. And you could really tell that Oda was honing down on these characters because he made sure that all 9 OG Straw Hats had their own story, own personality, and own moments that really made them feel real. And the crew, man, the crew, it felt like a family. It felt like I was a part of the crew. It felt like I was a part of the family. You could just feel how close everyone was just by watching them. The arguing, the joking, the fights. It was just a vibe. You know, post-Timeskip, the crew's still amazing. They still retain their personality and everything. But it really just feels like they're split up sometimes. But pre-Timeskip, they were always together. The Straw Hats were the heart of the story. Now, let me ask you this. Do you prefer the Straw Hats pre-Timeskip or post-Timeskip? And really think about it. And just to keep it simple, only include the Straw Hats that we got introduced to pre-skip. And in my opinion, out of the original 9, I actually preferred 4 of their pre-skip versions more. But it's not really about the downgrades or upgrades. It's about the crew's dynamic. It's about how they worked as a team, how they felt connected. In pre-Timeskip, every arc was about them being together. They were growing together. They were fighting together. And sure, a lot of this was still prevalent in post-Timeskip, but things definitely changed. A hell of a lot more characters got introduced. More spotlight was taken away from the Straw Hats at times. And yeah, some of them definitely didn't get the shine that they deserved. Just take Chopper, man, the plug. Pre-Timeskip, he was one of my favorite characters. I could honestly say that he's the one Straw Hat who peaked during his backstory. Monster Point and Eddie's Lobby, everything like that comes close, but I think Chopper did peak in his backstory. Don't get me wrong, he was still good the rest of pre-Timeskip for me, but he just fell off post-Timeskip, bro. I'm sorry. You know, he had so much heart, he had so much personality, but post-Timeskip, I don't know, man. He just felt like a mascot. And this is the biggest contrast from pre-Timeskip to post-Timeskip in my opinion. I don't know where I saw this, but I heard someone say that pre-Timeskip One Piece was more focused on the Straw Hats themselves, while post-Timeskip was more focused on the world building and, you know, the government, the politics, all of that. So definitely makes sense that most of the Straw Hats didn't get the shine that they actually needed post-Timeskip, because obviously the main premise of the story wasn't to focus on them, it was to focus on other issues in the world. But I still just wish that they had the charm that they had pre-Timeskip. I don't know, it just felt like they were lacking in areas. But enough about the characters, because there's another thing about pre-Timeskip that really just made it special to me, and that's the sense of adventure that it had. Every island felt like a new discovery. Like, you never really knew what was around the corner, and what was common was that the Straw Hats were always together right in the middle of it. The walk to Arlong Park, Luffy climbing Drum Island's mountain, that was a crazy moment, still one of my favorite Luffy moments today. And even the Going Merry's final moments. Just all these peak moments felt like you were traveling with the crew. It was like you were on the Merry itself. And Drum Island is a perfect example of this. Chopper's story, you know, his struggles with being accepted, his dream to become a doctor who could save anyone. And then you see the way that Luffy and the whole crew supported him. Luffy wasn't just like, oh, let's fight for him. It was much more personal than that. And pre-Timeskip did such a good job of making moments like that hit. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the crew was the center of the story. And don't even get me started on Arlong Park, bro. This was the arc that got me hooked into the story, and it just showed me how much pre-Timeskip could hit. I was really surprised seeing Nami's story, and I really didn't think that 40 episodes into this 1,100 episode plus anime would really get me reeled in like this. Before I started One Piece, I always heard people say that the story gets good 500 episodes in, but to me, it was honestly the opposite. I felt like One Piece got me hooked right from the beginning, and it was actually later that the story story didn't fall off, but the story didn't reach the heights it did during pre-timeskip. The storytelling also just felt tighter. It was more concise, personal, and balanced. One Piece definitely has its pacing issues, but I feel like you felt it more post-timeskip than pre-skip. And I was mainly able to get through it because the comedy, the charm, and the crew, just their interactions, them bonding, it was enjoyable and smooth for me. So I didn't mind the pacing. But when you get to longer arcs like Dressrosa and you have the camera focusing on the crowd for 90% of the episode about characters who I don't really care about, then, you know, that's when you really can notice the pacing. But it was different during pre-skip. And that's another thing I wanted to point out about pre-skip comedy. Like, in my honest opinion, I just felt like the jokes hit way harder during pre-skip. Now it just feels like all the crew's gags and, you know, the comedy is just placed into the story just for the sake of time. It feels like the jokes are kind of auto-recorded and, you know, the character is just waiting to say it. But I didn't really notice that much during pre-timeskip. And this just goes to show how strong the characters of pre-timeskip One Piece really were. The story didn't really need to have a spectacular arc. It could really just be the crew going fishing or, you know, just going to the playground or something, and it would still be so enjoyable just because the characters itself were so strong. You know, Water 7, Eni's Lobby, they're just fucking amazing. The arcs were definitely very big and intense, but, you know, at the heart of it all, it was all about friendship. It was about the crew standing up for each other. And don't even get me started on the whole Marineford saga, going from Amazon Lily, Impel Down, Marineford, even the post-war, the ASL flashback, bro, that was all peak. And the common thing that all these peak moments have is that they all showed the Straw Hats' true bond. No matter how big the story got, it always came back to the Straw Hats, the center, the heart of the story. Even during Marineford, where Luffy was literally away from the crew. What hit really hard about that arc was Luffy coming to the realization that he still had his friends. He lost the person the most important to him, his brother Ace. But at the end of the day, he wanted to go back to his crew. And I think it's really the last time we'll see Luffy be that vulnerable and have that many layers to his character again. And now let's talk about ambitions. You know, pre-timeskip, everyone had a dream. Luffy wanted to be the Pirate King. Zoro wanted to be the greatest swordsman. Nami wanted to map the whole world. Sanji wanted to see the all blue. And Chopper, he wanted to be a doctor for anyone in need. The roles of each crew member felt more important to me back then, especially because they were always talking about their dreams. But nowadays, I feel like these dreams, they just aren't talked about as much. I feel like they really did drive the story. You know, every island we went to, every villain we encountered, every arc, it tied back to these goals. And don't get me wrong, the ambitions, they're still there post timeskip, but, you know, it's not as focused. This is because the story is spread across the world now. The world government is involved, politics, all that stuff I said before. This can cause the personal stakes sometimes to just take a back seat. And I don't even think that's a bad thing to focus on the world for the second half of the story. I mean, we literally spent 500 episodes with the crew in the first half of the story. Why would I be complaining about the story actually taking the measures to go and explore other parts of the world and other serious conflicts in the story? I think that was perfectly fine. And I didn't really want to say this, but we're on the topic, so I kind of wanted to talk about how the crew sometimes felt like they lost a little bit of their personality. You know, you got the obvious Zoro not laughing anymore, and you know, you could say that's because of Mihawk and he realized that, you know, the world isn't a joke. But overall, I just felt like the crew didn't interact how they used to, and I just think that post timeskip was more serious, and the story was just so goddamn funny. Like, pre-timeskip really did just nail the comedy. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji arguing, Usopp's lies, Chopper's freaking out. The crew just felt so alive, man. I really just wish we had more of that now. But at the same time, pre-skip could get very serious. It had a perfect balance in my opinion. You had the emotional and serious highs, you know, tons of different moments, you know, Nami's help me, going Mary, looking, all of that, right? And don't get me wrong, post timeskip has a lot of emotional moments. Like, bro, Sanji's my favorite character. Whole Cake Island was my favorite arc. Sanji's backstory, it was my favorite backstory in the whole series. But I still think overall pre-timeskip just balanced the comedy and emotional moments better. And another thing I wanted to talk about was just the vast amount of characters that post-timeskip introduced. I know I talked about this a little earlier, but as I'm just yapping, I just feel like I have to talk about this again. I remember seeing King of Lightning's video about Wano. And don't get me wrong, Wano is another topic that I need to talk about in a future video. I'm not going to get into all that now, but there's a chart in the video that showed the amount of characters per One Piece arc, and literally every arc it just kept increasing. Like post time skip, it just has way too many characters in my opinion, and this is the main reason I think that Oda wasn't able to fully develop the main cast more, because he had to give room for Kiros and Dressrosa, he had to give room for like Shirahoshi and all of those characters. And when I really try to think about it, I'm trying to think of major moments that each Straw Hat had, excluding Luffy. Let's bring up Chopper real quick. Pre-time skip, he was great. I talked about this earlier. I love Chopper pre-time skip. But what the hell did Chopper accomplish or even do post-time skip, bro? I swear to God, if I don't stop myself, this video is going to turn into a Chopper rant, but I think I gotta leave that for another video. But I just genuinely cannot fathom what they did to Chopper. They turned Monster Point silly. They just dropped the ball, bro. I can't even name one significant thing he's done. And that's crazy. He's a main character. Anyways, enough of the Chopper yap. Pre-time skip just felt so special to me, man. Because at the end of the day, the main cast was just so strong. And I really just don't know if we're ever gonna get this layer and depth to the Straw Hats in the future. I feel like it's already long gone. I may like moments in post-time skip better, but at the end of the day, I have to say that as a whole, pre-time skip is just better written than post-time skip One Piece. It's kind of the same Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden debate. I have moments in Naruto Shippuden that made me like the story more, but when I went back to the OG Naruto series, I could really just see how much the characters were fleshed out and how well the story was written, and Shippuden just wasn't able to do that consistently. Honestly, all of this is just hard to put into words. I'm just yapping in this video. I don't have a script or anything, but the way that the arcs were structured in pre-time skip, the focus on the character, you know, the balance on adventure, humor, emotion, like everything literally just comes together perfectly in my opinion. And to close this video out, I just have to remind you guys again, I do not hate post time skip One Piece. So if I see one comment that says, oh, he hates post time skip, bro, I'm gonna do unspeakable things to you. All right, so that was a little yap video. Like, I don't even know, I didn't have a script or anything for this, completely unplanned. I just felt like I had to make this because I've been consuming so much One Piece lately, and I've kind of just been getting nostalgic, man. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, just, you know, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, join Discord, Instagram, all of that shit. And yeah, goodbye.